Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. And of course, I know we had a very quick lunch today. We apologize, but unfortunately, the time is very limited, and we have a lot to share with you and a lot to give you access to, information that's relevant for you, knowledge that you can trust, knowledge that you can use. Please, if you're coming in now, please take your seat as soon as you can so that we can start with this fascinating session. I'll tell you, it is not often I get the chance to welcome people I have welcomed 25 years ago. I'm talking about the dream team, the team that has been working on biometrics and on benchmarking performance of biometrics for the last 25 years. Patrick being somebody that I've known for 25 years, Craig and Mei Lee, I've known them a little bit later. But to me, they represent the most trusted authority on the subject. Whenever I want to know something, I go to NIST. Whenever I want to go to know something about the performance, cutting the hype away and getting to the truth and the facts, I go to NIST. And I particularly go to these three individuals. These are scientists of the highest caliber, and you will see that their commitment is to the truth, not any other agenda. So it's really exceptional that you are here today to hear them, listen to them, and it's exceptional that NIST has given us the top 3 resources as a gift for Africa, as a gift for ID for Africa. It's very difficult to get them to come somewhere, let alone to fly from the US to be with us. So I would like you to join me, please, with a round of applause, thanking NIST for their contribution, please. So I will introduce the speakers. This session will be moderator-free. So as soon as I introduce them on the stage, they will take over. Of course, I will be back at 4:15 to announce what you've all been waiting for, which is the location and the country that is hosting the 2025 ID for Africa. But until that time, we're going to all be listening attentively to these 3 individuals. I'll start by introducing my good old friend, Patrick GROTHER, who is the biometric testing project lead at NIST. Patrick. Craig Watson, who is the image group manager at NIST. And Miley NGAN, who is the computer scientist at NIST. Patrick, thank you so much. Thank you. Craig, thank you. Thank you. Miley, thank you. The floor is yours.
First, I want to thank Dr. Addick and the ID for Africa organization for inviting NIST to speak at this event today. Do I have the slides? Sorry, I clicked through. So you'll see on the agenda that there is about half the time is dedicated to face. We are going to talk about face, fingerprint, and iris, but face has been an important biometric for us over the last 4 to 5 years, and we felt with its inclusion in digital identity that it really required about half the time we have today to go over the many topics related to face. What you'll also see in our slides is there's going to be a lot of information, and we're not going to be able to cover everything in great detail, but we are making the slides available for download. So at the end of the presentation, we will have put up a QR code that you can scan and get access to the slides. So I'm going to first do a brief introduction to NIST as an organization. We are focused on measurement science, standards, and technology at NIST. And yes, that's our three primary focuses. And NIST as a whole, we have over 3,400 federal employees at NIST, and we proudly boast that we have physicists who have won 5 Nobel Prizes. I think another thing that's important to highlight on this is NIST is all about collaborative research and collaborative work. And you can see that by the fact that we have over 3,500 associates at NIST, and we have multiple programs that are designed to create a collaborative research environment with industry and academia. There are 5 labs at NIST. There's a material and physical measurement labs. There's an engineering lab. There is the information technology lab, a communication technology lab, and a NIST Center for Neutron Research. I highlighted the information technology lab because that's where our group, the image group, resides. And in addition to focusing on the NIST mission, we also, in our group, are focusing on ensuring identity for trust in commerce and justice. And real quickly, some of the ways we do that. So this is a collage of folks in the image group. We are very aware of our reputation at NIST, and as Dr. Addick said, we take that very seriously, and we try to perform rigorous, unbiased testing, and we often say we are proud to be a trusted third party in doing the biometrics testing that we do. We both are trusted to house large operational data sets from other government organizations in the US, and we are trusted by the developers who send us their software for testing. Some of the things in our group, we're all about interoperability, developing a common language. As an example, the ANSI-NIST ITL Biometric Data Interchange Standard, which was first introduced in 1986 and has gone through several revisions, serves as the cornerstone in the US for biometric data interchange and is used worldwide. We are all about supporting digital identity and fraud prevention in cases such as trusted traveler programs and benefits programs within the US. And in justice and law enforcement, we want to support the accurate identification of people who are making bad decisions, while at the same time supporting not falsely accusing others. And the other part we want to do is increase an understanding of capabilities and limitations in biometrics so that developers of the technology can make improvements. The end users of the technology know how to use the technology correctly, and then policy and decision makers can make good choices on putting up guardrails on the use of the technology. Okay, for this next section, I will say if you're a biometrics expert already, this might be a perfect place to take out your phone and check your messages, check your email, because this probably won't apply to you. So some desirable traits of biometrics. We want something that we all have. We want it to be unique. We want it to be stable over time. Easy to use, and ideally not easy to circumvent. And of course, we want accuracy. And this is where NIST comes in with our algorithm testing. We're interested in measuring error rates. We want small error rates, obviously. We want to be able to look at the trade-offs of template size and speed versus accuracy, and memory requirements of the software that's sent to us. We want to promote error rates that are stable over different demographic groups, and over different data changes in data. So here's many biometric modalities. Face, fingerprint, and iris, which I highlighted, is what our group focuses on, and you're going to hear a lot about today. And this slide lists many of the programs we have going on, the ongoing technology evaluations. And many of these we have been doing for over 20 years, and they have been evolving during that time. In speaker, I'll highlight that we also have a group in our division that does speaker recognition, and there's a group within the material measurement lab that works on DNA research at NIST. So I want to highlight a couple basic use cases. The first one is one-to-one verification. And in this case, you're taking two biometrics. It could be two face, It could be fingerprints or it could be iris. You're providing them to a feature extractor, which generates a template, and then those two templates are sent to a comparator, which puts out a match score. And then based on a set threshold, one can make a decision, is this the same person or not? And at NIST, we measure error rates because we use test data where we know the answer beforehand, and then we can score whether the algorithm is correct or not. And then the other primary use case we do is one-to-many. And this, again, sending a biometric to create a template, but in this case, we're comparing it to an enrollment database of size N, which can be tens, hundreds, thousands, or millions, which generates a candidate list. And again, we have a threshold that's set based on operational decisions, and we can make decisions on whether the person is in the database or not according to the algorithm, and then calculate error rates. So the next thing I want to introduce, we're going to debut about a 1-minute video that highlights false positives, false negatives. And I want to give credit to my colleague Mayan, who played a major role in putting this, not only putting this video together, but you may do voice recognition and realize that she is the voiceover in the video.
Biometrics play a critical role in securing facilities and devices, protecting our borders, and preventing crime. When choosing biometrics as a security measure, you need to understand false positive rates and false negative rates. False positive rate is the rate at which a system incorrectly matches the wrong person. False negative rate is when the system fails to correctly match the right person. The percentage of false positives and false negatives determines the accuracy. In your smartphone, a false positive means your phone thinks someone else is you. A false negative means that your phone thinks you are someone else. Too lenient of a false positive rate might let many people unlock your phone, while too stringent of a false positive rate could make it too difficult even for you to unlock. No system is 100% accurate. Depending on how high or low your false positive rate is, you either get less security for more convenience or more security for less convenience. So, measuring false positive rates and false negative rates helps quantify how effective and secure a biometric system is and determine the level of trade-offs between convenience and security.
So just to highlight, false negative is when a system fails to correctly match two samples from the same person, and false positives are when the system incorrectly matches samples that are from two different people. And then you can adjust an operational threshold to make decisions on whether you want more security or more convenience. And that's going to vary from system to system. Yeah. And since we're all about standards, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in 19795, there is a similar diagram showing a biometric system, and it shows everything from the data capture to signal processing to data storage, and then the matching process and making decisions based on whether it's verification or identification outcome that you're looking for. And I also I won't spend much time on this, there's a lot here, but there are a lot more metrics out there in biometrics that we measure. Some related to capture and processing, some related to one-to-one verification or identification, presentation, attack detection, and the use case of investigation, which is often used by law enforcement. And there's also other different types of testing. NIST is focused primarily in the area of technology testing, which is offline testing, and we can use large volumes of biometric data to do that testing. And that's our area of focus. But there's also scenario testing, where you bring in human subjects and you run them through an environment that's designed to simulate an operational environment so that you can try to analyze how this process works from end to end, how the system works from end to end. And then there's also operational testing or monitoring. So you need to make, the first two can give you a really good idea of how the biometric's gonna work in operation, but you need to also test that in your operational environment and make sure that works and monitor it over time to make sure that changes in the system don't have unintended consequences. All of this is to say, be careful if you hear something like our algorithm's 99.5% accurate, because there's a lot more that you should know. You want to know what was the false accept rate to get to 99.5% things like that. How fast is the algorithm? How much resources does the algorithm take up when you run it? And then in the use case considerations, be thinking about risk. Risk, impacts, what's the impact of a false positive or a false negative? And that varies from system to system and use case to use case. And then you also want to make sure that that accuracy is balanced across different demographic groups like age, race, and sex. And I think from here I'm going to hand it off to Patrick.
Yeah, good afternoon. So we'll do Q&A in about 30 minutes. So Slido is available to you, the same link as usual. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end as well, if there's time. I'm going to talk about face recognition. For many of you, it's a well-known modality, but maybe not being used. Fingerprints was the mainstay for decades. But face recognition, because of its recent gains, has taken some market share maybe from the fingerprint industry. So we'll talk about state of the art, we'll talk about twins and aging, and human adjudication. Humans end up in the loop with most biometrics, but particularly with face. We'll talk about demographics, because it's in the news every day, and then May will come and talk about some attacks on face recognition. So, Craig mentioned that we are famous for running benchmarks. You can see 9 benchmarks that we are running. These are done independently, and we do these for free. We do not take money from developers, and we tend to publish everything, including the developer name. That imposes a reputational risk for a developer to participate in our benchmarks, so they make a best effort to send us very accurate software. We have 2 sets of benchmarks, as you can see, those to do with core face recognition. That's about who is in a photograph, and then the set below in orange to do with something about a photo. Is it a good quality photo? How old is the person in the photo? Is it an attack? Different benchmarks for different things, different algorithms, but we open these essentially to a global audience, and we run these on sequestered data, meaning the developer doesn't get to see the data, doesn't get to use the data, doesn't get to tune to the data. We are privileged to hold data coming from US government operations like border control, and that is the basis for our benchmarks. So let's jump in. And I'll start with a sort of a provocative statement and say that face recognition search will succeed 100% of the time. That, of course, is a false statement, but I qualify it by these bullets. It will work 100% of the time if you're using a recent algorithm, not an algorithm from a decade ago. There has to be a mate in a database. If you haven't seen the person before, you're not going to retrieve them. There can't be too long a time lapse between photographs. We all age, as I will show you later, and that the image hasn't been manipulated in some way. That is the domain of attacks. And we try to detect those and avoid those. And of course, quality. You can't state how well face recognition works without talking about the environment in which the photos were collected and essentially their quality. There are a number of other caveats which we will discuss. All right, quality exists on a spectrum. It's very easy to do quite a bad job of photography. And if you, of course, feed bad quality data to face recognition, then it will fail, as it will with iris and voice and fingerprint. Okay, so let's look at one-to-one. It's used on phones, on cards, on passports, in border control, in one-to-one mode, which I'll discuss now. So very popular in the United States recently is to take a government-issued ID, and because there's no chip on government-issued IDs, driving licenses in the United States, the government, the way biometrics is done is to scan the 2D face with the artifacts from the counterfeiting layers and to verify it against the live selfie. And that works today. It wouldn't have worked 10 years ago, but it works today in large part. And that kind of thing allows you to sort of confirm identity. So the first graph of the day, and this is for 5 different databases from algorithms from one developer. And this is an American company, but it could be pretty much any of the companies, any of the developers that participate in our tests. And what it's showing is authentication error rate, how often I can't authenticate as me over the last 6 or 7 years. And those error rates have come down by 2 orders of magnitude, from 20 or 30% to 2%, and now down towards 0.2% on multiple different databases. That's the colored traces here. And what that enables is a larger set of applications of face recognition and more dependable operation, that you will not encounter too many recognition errors in cooperative applications. The implication of this is that if you're using an algorithm from 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's well past time that you upgrade it. Now, if you're sitting on a central database, you would need to retemplate all of the images in that database. That might not be a trivial undertaking, but this is the accuracy gains that you will realize. What this means is that databases that you didn't find mates in a few years ago, you would find mates today. So if you were doing unsolved criminal cases, you might solve them. We don't use easy images. These are collected on the southern border of the United States. They are what you would call mediocre quality images. Many cooperative applications of interest to you would be better quality than this. And yet, these images can be matched very, very successfully with very low error rates, well below 1% false negative rates. And to put it sort of more graphically here, many of you, some of you will be old enough to remember the Beatles, and John Lennon here, famous songwriter, musician, in the 1960s changed his appearance over quite a short period of time, as you can see in the 2 photographs. When we first ran these photos through algorithms a decade ago, there was no match. It wouldn't authenticate John Lennon as John Lennon. And today, all the leading algorithms, all 4 of the leading developers that you see listed here will match those 2 photographs successfully. So the algorithms have become tolerant of changes in appearance. And that is a useful thing in biometrics, to look at identity and don't be distracted by changes in appearance. How did that happen? There was a revolution that was kicked off a decade ago by Facebook with an algorithm that they called DeepFace, and that they published it. And of course, Facebook has got lots of data, and they used it, 1,000 photographs of 4,000 people. And it proceeds through this layered computation, a neural network, which extracts increasingly abstract patterns from the face, from the input pixels of the face. And it puts together this thing that's called an embedding in the AI world. It's called a template in the biometrics world. And it may have some bookkeeping information, but it's just a mathematical representation of identity. And of course, as Craig showed you, you can compare 2 faces, and you can produce similarity scores. Those black boxes from the developers include considerable intellectual property. That is the value of the biometric developers. Some are much better and more accurate than others. Some are smaller than others, some are more accurate than others, but they contain considerable IP and trade secrets. There is no such thing as a standard face template. So we can't operate at the template level, we have to operate and interoperate at the image level. And we're used to seeing the passport-style portrait as the standard interoperable format. If you're using AI, most of the industry moved to adopt AI and convolutional neural networks and other kinds of neural networks since the Facebook paper. And with the adoption of AI come some risks. And this is discussed generically in terms of reliability and fairness, and whether things are safe and secure and resilient. And in the face recognition world, we can sort of map that onto different properties of a biometric system that we would like. We want it to be accurate. We want demographic effects, variations to be small. Safety is something that you would think about if you're concerned with cameras and environment. Security, you don't want backdoors. You don't want data poisoning. You want your system to be cyber secure. You would like it to function correctly with anomalous inputs. So if we put a photograph of a cat into a face recognition engine, you wouldn't want it opening the door for you. And rejection of attacks. Can it be explained and interpreted, say, in a courtroom? And is it privacy preserving? Does it leak information in some way? And can it be hacked? These are things that you would need to think about, and that is part of the full scope. This one I think we addressed already. It's not just about accuracy, it's whether it would fit within your system. If you are running on a cell phone, you may do something different than if you're running on a central server or on a wall-mounted camera. Different template sizes and speeds and amount of memory that is being used. And of course, the last bullets on the left there, different cost. And different cost models. Do you pay per enrollment or do you pay per search? These kinds of things. So lots to think about. One thing that I didn't mention, and that is failure to capture. Some e-gates, like on the right side of this slide in Los Angeles, are doing what's called face-aware capture. They are trying to collect a good face with the possibility that occasionally they don't collect a face. Say, are they doing quality assessment and face detection? Many other operations, primary immigration into the United States on the left side, doesn't have a face detector, it's a dumb camera. So you don't have a failure to capture rate. They open the shutter, they take a photo, and it always yields a photo. And of course there's trade-offs here. You get a better quality thing if you take the time to measure quality. All right, let's move on and talk about one-to-many. One-to-many, of course, is useful because it can recover information that you've got in your database about the photograph that's in the database. It could be that I boarded a plane. It could be that you saw this person standing outside an embassy looking suspicious. It could be anything. But this is the value of one-to-many search, and it's used quite extensively. It's used when you leave the United States today. In a one-to-many mode, you record your departure from the United States according to a manifest of all the people that are expected to be on a plane. That's a 1 to 400 search, very easy for face recognition to succeed in that domain. And it's access control to a plane. So that's an example. Again, we see a reduction in error rates that's marked over the last 4 or 5 years because of continued innovations in AI. And so to show you some examples of when face recognition will succeed, what we did is we took my photo there, taken in 2004, and we put it in a gallery with 12 million other people. And then we searched the photos that are on the bottom. And you can see it starts off to the left with very good quality photos, and the photos go downhill to the right. All of these things with 12 different algorithms, I think 12 different algorithms, they give a high-scoring result at rank 1, meaning you find the correct identity in 12 million, despite the various aging amounts and the various quality degradations. So you can see me with sunglasses there, you can see me not looking at the camera. Face recognition will tolerate these changes in appearance today. And we continue with even worse images, and they all still return match scores, high scores at rank 1. So one-to-many search is quite powerful, even with substandard images. These are probably worse images than you would be aiming to collect in your operations today. Some of these are non-cooperative, and it's difficult to find images that don't match. The one on the left gives a rank 1 weak hit for many algorithms, and the one on the right was only hit by one algorithm developed in China, and it only matched me at rank 15. So 14 other people were more similar. But obviously that's a pretty bad image, and you wouldn't use that. would arrange your environment and your photography to avoid that. If that was a good story, now this is not a good story. This is what happens when we put May in a database and we search May's sister. And May's sister, according to 10 algorithms, find May's sister at rank 1. That is a problem because it's not May. And you would expect this because they're related individuals. This wouldn't happen with fingerprints. Fingerprints, as far as we know, are not genetically driven like sisters are. And so with iris recognition, you would not expect this. But this is a problem that comes with face recognition. Another problem that comes with face recognition, as you can see, is that we all get older, more or less gracefully. I am the product of a very easy job over 20 years, so my face has not aged one little bit. But generally, similarity will go down. I don't look like myself 20 years ago, and this ultimately will cause face recognition to fail. Most of you won't care about this because your operations would include re-enrollment every 5 years or every 10 years or every next visit over short time periods. And that's possible and doable. Passport offices typically do 10 years, sometimes 5 years. But there is a demographic group where aging matters, and that is in children. Children obviously age quickly, they grow quickly, and their appearance changes quickly. So this is a synthetic image taken from a synthesizer on the New York Times website. And I just use it as a toy example to just show that facial appearance is changing. But we can put numbers behind this, and some of our benchmarks put numbers behind this. And now this is an algorithm, Clearview. This is a website that's quite controversial because it affords anybody in law enforcement to search databases scraped from the whole planet. So you can see somebody at a party. If you're a police officer, you can launch a search and you can try and find out who you've just seen. This figure, red is bad, blue is good. It's how often a search doesn't yield the right candidate. You can see that when you put somebody in a database at age 12 and you search 10 years later, 10 years of aging, this algorithm will fail 15, 20% of the time. Now, it would work 85% of the time maybe, but that might not be sufficient for your purposes. Now, it turns out, and this is a key point in this presentation, that different algorithms work much better than others. So you have to have buyer beware mentality when choosing a recognition provider. And in particular, on this aging task, we see that this algorithm, set of algorithms coming from Japan works much better than others, much, much better than others. How they do that is their intellectual property. And that's this is why we pay the money for algorithms that will do this. Now, maybe you're not concerned with aging, but you may well be concerned with children. And so this may be important to you. And of course, this effect of age is much more important than the effect of aging. As we go across this slide, from 10 years to 15 years, the recognition gets worse, but only slightly worse. Age is more important. And there are differences between males and females. So we now get on to demographics, and this is a topic that's in the news every day. And there's a lot of discussion about what this means. And so we're going to talk about false and negative rates, how often somebody can't authenticate as themselves, and then we'll talk about false positive rates, how often two people get confused. And so, as an anecdote, I'm going to talk about a lawsuit in the UK between various drivers who were driving for Uber, very common in Cape Town and very useful in Cape Town, and biometrics is not being done in Cape Town. But in the UK it is, and several drivers with dark skin were unable to authenticate and unable to do their job, so they were fired by Uber. And this is pending litigation. what that looks like is a false negative. They could not authenticate. And it is probably due to Uber not providing the environment for taking good photographs. If you have poor photographs of the kind that I showed on the last slide, then face recognition will fail. And so this is pending litigation, and it may be decided a different way, but this is an anecdote about false negatives. People can't authenticate as themselves. And now the problem is photography. And the problem goes to biology and physics, and this is to do with dark skin not reflecting as much light to a camera as fair skin. The image on the left shows bright hot spots on the nose and on the forehead, and it shows very dark areas around the chin. That's a high contrast image which you try to store in a conventional JPEG file. The image on the right has got lower contrast. It has the hot spot still, but the rest of the face is reflecting light. Because of this difficulty in photography, and you can talk to professional photographers and ask them about how to take photographs of dark skin, they will say lots of diffuse light. Not these lights, diffuse light. And that affords better photography. Now, of course, you can always do a bad job of photography. This is me sitting at home, and this is the kind of thing that you have to avoid when doing face recognition. This is an image taken from an academic paper published by colleagues in Washington, D.C. This is the same, two different people on the left and the right, taken by 12 different cameras. And you can see that the skin tone is not being reproduced faithfully. Now, these photographs were taken within minutes of each other. And so color reproduction of cameras is not very good. The good news is that face recognition algorithms are used to seeing such spurious variations and tolerate it. We run benchmarks, we've reported this in the past, but we do tend to see mildly higher error rates in African people born in Africa that have visited the United States. And this is a typical trend, but the vertical axis here is low tenths of 1%. Accuracy is very, very good, even with substandard photography. That's because of AI and the revolution. So false negatives occur primarily due to quality. This will occur in applications where we are authenticating to phones and time and attendance systems and border crossing. It can be upset by poor photography. And who is affected by this? Particularly children, particularly women, particularly dark skin, tall people with a fixed height camera, very short people with a fixed height camera. Different ways to do bad photography will affect face recognition. Google worked on the skin tone problem, and they made an advert during the Super Bowl, a very, very popular TV event in the United States. This is 2 years ago. And they've been building considerable high-end techniques into their phones for the purposes of producing beautiful photos. This is not for biometrics, but it could be. We could envisage further standardization, maybe in cooperation with the phone manufacturers, to produce biometric capture APIs that do a good job without changing the image in unacceptable ways. But this is progress, and it brings awareness to the topic of bad photography. All right, so we'll now move on to the other part of demographics, false positive rates. Now, false positive rates have the potential to confuse me with somebody else, and that's unwelcome and can be very problematic. Now, Apple, when they released their phone, the iPhone 10 in 2017, made the claim, and it's on their website today, that the false match rate, if I pick up somebody's phone in the street, random comparison, false match rate of 1 in a million. I've got essentially zero chance of opening somebody else's phone. However, within a few weeks, they put a statement, which is also still on the website today, that says, if you're under the age of 13, or you're a twin or sibling, then the probability is higher. And so what we have here is a declaration from a very famous vendor, very well-funded vendor, that their face recognition system has a demographic issue, very open about this, and that the false match rate will be much higher than 1 in a million. And I've seen false matches between my sister and her daughter opening their phone recently. So false positives are, in our benchmarks, are more common in women and in ethnicities that are unknown to the algorithm. That includes African faces, but also East Asian faces, sometimes South Asian faces. So this is not specifically linked to skin tone, it's linked to the ethnicity being unknown to the algorithm. The algorithm was trained on data that was majority something else. This is critical in applications where you have an open universe search. I walk into a casino, I'm not on their database of people who cheat at cards. I'm not on their database of high rollers. I go to a football stadium, I'm not on the database of somebody who is a hooligan. I'm not the subject of Big Brother surveillance. I'm not in one of those databases. If there's a false positive, bad things can happen. And what you don't want is unpredictable false positive rates. Now, this demographic problem does exist in face recognition, and we can see an anecdote on the right there. A face recognition user in the United States was just sanctioned by regulators. A pharmacy in the United States was looking for shoplifters, using a system that was biased against certain ethnicities, and they were prevented from using face recognition for 5 years by US regulators. I didn't include that on this slide, but yeah, so demographics summary. We have very good algorithms today, but the false positive differentials are quite serious. They can be fixed by having an elevated threshold. Don't give me false positives. Now that's possible, but you incur some higher false negatives. Some one-to-many search algorithms don't have these problems. So it becomes incumbent to know your algorithm. Craig mentioned operational testing. If you own a system, it's very good practice to be able to test that system using arrangements that you've made maybe before you even deploy the system. Testing is important, and it will reveal things about the behavior of the system. Maybe you can look at NIST test reports if you know which algorithm is being used. The press reports that you read are wildly all over the place in terms of accuracy. Sometimes they confuse one-to-one with one-to-many, false positive with false negative. It's good to be specific about what we're talking about. I should have pointed out slightly earlier that if you're sitting on a central database, you're an owner of a system, say in Africa or somewhere else, a developer might come to you and want to train on your data. There's considerable value in your data, in your databases, and the developer would be attracted to this so that they can diversify their data. There's economic value in your data, and you wouldn't want to necessarily give it to them, not without some compensation or some negotiation. And if they do train on your data, then you would want to do a before test and an after test to see if it actually gives you any benefit. Okay, so in summary, false negatives from bad photography, false positives are an algorithm responsibility due to non-diverse data. And that's another summary slide that you can look at when you can download these slides at the end of this presentation. Now, I mentioned twins, and this is another false positive problem. This is not unexpected. Identical twins will authenticate as each other. That means if I have a passport and I'm an identical twin, my twin can get on the plane, immigrate into the country as me. Is that a problem for you? I don't know. Application problems depend on the application, right? there's some twins, there's May and her sister again giving you a false positive. They're 50% genetically related, I think. And so this is a characteristic of face recognition that twins give false positives. Now, why does this matter? Because siblings are quite common, but also twins are very common. Identical and fraternal twins, two kinds of twins. They're much more common in Africa than they are in East Asia. I'm not sure anybody knows why. And they're becoming more common as women have babies later in life. So this is 3% of babies that arrive in the United States each year are a twin. 3% is quite a lot. And some of them are a different sex and you don't have these problems, but false positives can occur, so you should be aware of this. Twins and other cases fall in the lap of humans to adjudicate. So if you're in law enforcement, you would look at two photos. If you're in a border crossing situation and you think, this passport holder is not the person in front of me, you would have somebody look at the two photos and they would have to make a decision. That is a very hard thing to do. You can try it yourself, courtesy of a university in Australia. You can test yourself. I'm not very good at it. Same person or different person, and we know it's a different person in this case. We know this person. We looked at him for 8 years, and so we know his face very well, so it's easy to say it's Barack Obama or not. But if I show you a different pair of faces, this comes from our colleagues at the Norwegian police, and I don't actually know the answer to this, and I can stare at these two photos for quite a while, and I'm not sure if it's the same person or not, and I can't give you the answer. But you can make a decision. Maybe some of you are better at this than I am. But this is what becomes the responsibility of police and border control and other people to make decisions. Right, and so this happens in investigations. So Google, we go to Google, we search, we can hit two buttons. We can say, I want to review lists of documents for their relevance. We do this in biometrics, and criminal justice in the United States at least looks at lists of photos, like on the left of this slide. But there's another way to use Google, and that's this lights out. And by analogy, if we search a face image against a database and we have a threshold, we make a decision immediately. The door opens, or I get on the plane, or somebody comes up to me and says, you're a previous shoplifter, leave the shop. So this is investigation versus lights out identification. Face recognition can be used in these two modes. And mistakes get made. Now, there were very, very famous cases in the United States in the last couple of years about people that were incorrectly arrested. This wasn't really the responsibility. It wasn't the result of this was not face recognition. These were investigative searches and bad police work. And this has been discussed and documented now quite extensively, that the police did bad practice in investigating the result. But they got these faces returned from a face recognition search engine, and they had bad practice after the fact. So it's a human failure. Human failure at looking at the photos initially, but then doing the work that police do when they investigate crimes. And quite serious consequences for the individuals involved in this, time in prison, and the gentleman on the right was offered a plea deal by a prosecutor when he shouldn't have been, entirely innocent. Right, and the algorithms will sort of match photos that don't look, that aren't of good quality, and they shouldn't do this. So that photograph on the left was in a central database in New Jersey, and as you can see, it's a noisy photograph, and it shouldn't have a role in a central database. People shouldn't put such images in databases. Quality control is important when you're running an authoritative biometric system. Human capability, this is a publication from 2017. Different people, examiners, reviewers, super recognizers, fingerprint examiners, students, and their capability. At the very top of this slide, you perfectly adjudicate 20 pairs of photos. If you're in the middle of this slide, you're making random choices. Some people are worse than random, believe it or not. Human capability is not perfect. Most leading commercial algorithms today give you perfect results on this data set. Humans do not. Humans are far worse on images like this at doing face recognition. To the rescue, we hope, is training. This is a slide from our colleagues in Norway. They are offering training online for free worldwide. You can sign up in 3 areas: face comparison, looking at 2 faces, also morph detection, which May will talk about shortly, and in future they will talk about presentation attack detection. Is somebody wearing a face mask? They're doing quite detailed training. This is available. I've put a link there, and you'll have to engage with the Norwegians to see if it's suitable for you. But I draw that to your attention because humans are part of identity systems. Okay, my colleagues at NIST are working on a new study of human capability, and this is cross-race matching. So if I'm a white guy and I'm looking at white photos, I get some level of accuracy. I'm a white guy looking at African photos, I get a different level of accuracy, maybe. This is a study. They're recruiting particularly people who've been trained in this discipline, facial examiners, face comparison professionals, and those people that are naturally super recognizers. This is a study that will proceed and will be published in the years ahead. So I give you a link to email the organizers if you're interested in participating in that study. Okay. I hand over to May now to talk about morphing.
Thank you for the applause. So Patrick just talked about the accuracy and performance of face recognition. What I'm going to talk about next is slightly different. I'm going to talk about how one might attack a face recognition system. Okay, so here we have a photo. You might want to take a couple of seconds and take a look at this photo, see if perhaps you might recognize who this individual is. And based off of, the folks in the audience and the laughter, perhaps you already know the answer. This image was generated with 2 people by merging the faces of 2 previous United States presidents. And the image manipulation technique used to generate this image is called face morphing. And the output of this face morphing is an image that has the likeness of both contributing subjects. And in this example, there are 2 subjects involved. From a technical standpoint, you can morph any number of faces together to generate a morph. So there are a number of ways to generate a morph, and the software to do it is often free and pretty easy to use. In the early days, morphs were generated by merging features in the image space, by identifying key facial landmarks and then overlaying them in the image space. More recently, though, morphs can be generated using generative AI. So that's the technology behind the creation of deepfakes. So the point here is there's no shortage of tools to generate morphs, and the methods are evolving. So the issue with morphs is this technique can be used to fool face recognition. When you generate a morph photo and you use face recognition to compare it with photos of the contributing subjects, face recognition systems are fooled by this and will incorrectly authenticate both subjects to that morphed image. And this happens because the morph contains features from both contributing subjects. So we've been evaluating face recognition algorithms over the years, and all of the algorithms that we've tested can be vulnerable to morphing. And parts of the United States government have also validated this in their operational matchers. So sort of the classic example of morphing being used in identity fraud is passports. The US and a number of countries worldwide currently rely heavily on mail-in applications as a part of the passport process. So you can conceive of an attacker working with an accomplice, someone who already owns a passport. They generate a morph of the 2 of them, and then they submit this morph photo as a part of their passport application. And when the passport office receives this, a human examiner may look at the image, and it'll most likely pass any sort of visual check. And ultimately, a new passport will get issued with a morph on it. So keep in mind that the application process is vulnerable because it accepts user-submitted photos that could potentially be manipulated. And once that morph photo gets onto the passport, we now have a fraudulent yet genuine document that can be used by multiple parties. And this morphing process, not only can it be applied to faces, it can be applied to fingerprints and irises as well. So morphs have been uncovered operationally. Perhaps the most recent case is from Slovenia, where airport authorities uncovered a number of passports with morphed photos on them. Many of the cases were of Albanian citizens trying to use a Slovenian passport with a morph on it to get onto flights to Toronto, most likely to obtain refugee status in Canada. So point here is morphs are currently in circulation, and the problem is there is no definitive or effective way of detecting them. So algorithms have been developed to try and detect morphs, and NIST has been testing these algorithms ever since 2018-2019 timeframe. And you can try and apply morph detection sort of in two different phases of operations. You could try and run morph detection during the document issuance phase. And more likely than not, let's say you only have a single image in isolation, and you could potentially run a morph detector on that image to figure out whether you could flag suspicious activity or not. We've tested a number of these single image morph detectors, and it really is a hard problem. The algorithms don't generalize well across morphing methods that they have not seen or encountered before. So we basically have a generalizability problem, and because morphing techniques are evolving constantly, we're sort of in an arms race. So the best thing to do really during the enrollment phase or the document issuance phase is to implement trusted capture of some form. Don't allow the user to submit any sort of manipulated image. Now what we have found though is that there is a more promising opportunity to do morph detection in a border crossing scenario. So let's say someone is trying to use a passport at an e-gate, and the photo on the passport may or may not be a morph. So the e-gate reads the image from the chip, and it also collects an additional live capture photo of the person trying to use that passport. And developers have come up with ways to actually make morph detection more viable and generalizable, because they're actually using identity information to do morph detection instead of going around looking for particular image artifacts. And one of the developers we've tested, I believe, is in the process of piloting their morph detector in their e-gate product. All right, so what we just talked about, it has to do with automated morph detection using software. Now, even if automated morph detection flags something as being suspicious, it will still require a human to remediate and verify the issue. We don't imagine morph detection being a lights-out process. So recall that you have just seen a morph of the two presidents, which a lot of you were able to recognize. Here we have a lineup of 3 photos. They may or may not be morphs. And if you want to spend a couple seconds to see if you can recognize whether you can see which one is a morph or not. So just a quick show of hands, how many people think A is a morph? How many people think B is a morph? How many people think C is a morph? Okay, so I didn't see a lot of hands up, but chances are, unless you know these people, it's pretty hard to definitively say which one of these are morphs or not. And perhaps you may recognize the gentleman in the middle, but often in immigration contexts and forensic contexts, the human reviewer will most likely not know the people that you're dealing with. And there have been a number of research studies looking at how well humans perform with morph detection. And the general consensus is that human ability to detect morphs remains limited, especially when you don't know the parties involved. As Patrick had mentioned, our colleagues in Norway, they're in the process of developing training for detecting morph face images to try and improve officer and examiner awareness and ability to detect morphs. And they're also in the process of developing presentation attack detection training as well, which I'll touch upon in a moment. Okay, so we know that modern face recognition and humans can be vulnerable to face morphing. What can we do about it? I know there's a lot of text on this slide, but the key takeaways here are the long-term solution to this morphing problem is to implement trusted capture of some form. Don't allow the user to send in an image that could potentially be manipulated. And trusted capture doesn't necessarily have to be live enrollment. You could do what the folks in Ireland do, and they currently have some places where they have these photo booths where you can go in, take a picture for your passport, but they don't actually, the user doesn't get the image. The image actually is signed, encrypted, and sent directly to the State Department so that the user does not have an opportunity to do any sort of manipulation. Additionally, humans will always be a key part of the process because even if an automated morph detection system flags something as being suspicious, it still requires a human to remediate the issue. So it really is quite important to establish awareness and develop effective training that is, important, particularly for folks that might come into contact with morphs. And also, last point here is the human reviewer will be more successful if there are solid secondary review processes in place so that they can make a more informed decision. So in the case where the airport authorities in Slovenia had detected these morphs, how they did it was they were able to, in secondary, pull up another image of the actual owner of the passport from an external driver's license database and use that to verify that the user and the owner of the passport were different people. So we envision that a viable solution for morph detection will involve the integration of technology, humans, and processes. Okay, so we just talked about morphing. The next topic I'm going to talk about is presentation attack. And presentation attack is another form of attack which occurs during biometric capture. And presentation attack is where an attacker attempts to alter their presentation to the camera with goals of interfering with biometric authentication. And if you're going to deploy a biometric system in a remote setting where the capture is not supervised by a trusted attendant, presentation attack is possible. So presentation attacks are usually launched with one of two goals. The first goal is impersonation. So an attacker might try to spoof or impersonate the identity of someone else. The second attack goal is of evasion. So the user is just trying not to be recognized as themselves. And there are a number of presentation attack instruments that are found in the public domain, ranging from printed photos to facial cosmetics to expensive high-resolution 3D masks. If you look at the image on the lower left, that's actually me after applying a lot of makeup, putting on a wig, and then putting on a mustache. And after that, I was actually locked out of my phone because Face ID no longer recognized me. Okay, so when we're talking about presentation attack, we're mostly referring to physical analog artifacts where a subject is making a modified presentation to the camera. There is this other type of attack, digital attack, known as injection attack, which involves hacking or taking over the device's sensor stream and then injecting photos or video frames in the digital domain. And this can happen when the integrity of your sensor has been compromised. Injection attacks could arguably be considered more of a cybersecurity issue, but it's an important issue nonetheless within the attack landscape. But for what we're talking about today, we're going to be primarily focused on physical presentation attacks. So there's a need to detect presentation attacks, and presentation attack detection, or what we call PAD, PAD capabilities generally fall into a couple of categories. So there's active PAD, where in applications where the user is able to interact with the system in real time, some PAD implementations can require the user to do a series of random actions, such as blink your eyes, turn your head, and it's important that the series of actions is random, such that the attacker can't pre-stage these actions ahead of time. There's also hardware-based PAD. If PAD is deployed on a face-aware device, biometric-aware device, such as a mobile device, there are opportunities to employ more sophisticated PAD approaches that involve other sensors or other illuminants or other non-standardized signals supported by the hardware. And in cases where we don't have access to a biometrically enabled capture device, we can't interact with the user in real time, then one might implement what we call passive software-based PAD, where an algorithm takes an input image or an input sequence of video frames and make a determination purely based off of the input imagery as to whether there's a presentation attack launched in the image. Okay, so last year, NIST ran a presentation attack detection benchmark looking at passive software-based PAD algorithms. essentially that black box at the bottom there. We published a report on our findings, and I'll talk a little bit about what we learned in a second. Our colleagues over at the Department of Homeland Security, they're also currently running a technology demonstration which includes PAD, and they are actually looking at human-in-the-loop active PAD and also hardware-based PAD approaches. So as I just mentioned, last year we ran a benchmark looking at how well passive-based, software-based PAD approaches work. And this basically involved providing either an input image or video frame into the algorithm. And the algorithm makes a determination on whether they think a presentation attack is present in the media. We didn't test any hardware solutions. There was no user interaction involved. It was purely image in and decision out. And this type of passive frictionless PAD is relevant in situations, as I mentioned, where a non-biometric camera is used, and you collect an image, and perhaps you would send the image into the cloud to do presentation attack detection in software. And we tested impersonation and evasion as separate tasks, and ultimately reported results on 82 PAD algorithms over 45 developers worldwide, so it was quite well participated. Now, what did we learn? We learned that PAD performance varied significantly across algorithms, use cases, and attack types. And perhaps this isn't a surprise to us. The good news is the detection of some attack types was well supported by multiple developers. So attack types where error rates were quite low included the photo print replay attacks, protective face masks, and flexible silicone face masks. We also found that when you fuse multiple PAD algorithms together, it actually improved accuracy over any single PAD algorithm alone. Also, many of the PAD algorithms had generated lower error rates when the input imagery was a sequence of video frames compared to just a single still image. So it appears that the developers are able to take advantage of the additional information over multiple frames. The bad news here is that some developers' algorithms worked well at detecting particular attack types, but none of them could detect all of the attack types that we tested. So this sounds like there's a generalizability problem here as well. Our PAD benchmark is currently closed, but we plan on reopening the test in the future and perhaps running it in an ongoing mode. So to run a relevant test requires relevant test data. So if your organization has an interest in this PAD problem, please come talk to us. We want to collaborate. We're interested. Okay, so Patrick?
So yes, a few slides on iris recognition. Iris recognition, of course, was invented in the early 90s with considerable market presence and utility. The iris most recently has been built into an Apple device. This, what is it? What do you call this? Augmented reality, or and again, Apple say 1 in a million. And they also make the claim here that it's going to be very resistant to spoofing. So May just talked about attacks. If I wear some kind of contact lens or some other kind of attack, will I be able to use your Apple device? And so Apple is using this, and it's interesting. Of course, it's very natural if you're going to put this over your eyes to do iris recognition. Iris is often considered and confused in the press with retinal recognition. So you'll see people say that I just had my retina scanned. There was some biometrics companies doing retinal scans many years ago, but it's not very comfortable an experience. You put a lot of light in the eye, and it's no longer used. It is used in livestock management in some places. But today, the iris is on the left, and it's the front of the eye. This is what we're looking at. And iris is peculiar in that we can't just use an off-the-shelf camera. We need a dedicated device. And the reason for that is because a large percentage of the planet has got brown eyes. Brown eyes don't reflect much light. except in the near infrared. And so if we illuminate the eye with near infrared, of the kind that comes out of your TV remote control, then you will see detail in brown-eyed people that you don't see in visible light. And that, of course, is attractive for several reasons. It means that I can't steal somebody's iris very easily. So if I want to open your Apple device, I need your iris to start with. Now, how do I get your iris? I could try taking a photo in this room now, and I would get nothing. Very low resolution and the wrong wavelength of light. I'll back up, and we'll compare with face a little bit. We can put both of these things on a passport. Typically, iris is not used in border control, but the hooks are there in the ICAO LDS specification to put an iris on a passport. The technical work has been done to put a 3 kilobyte iris image on a passport. So that can be done. It is being used in border control, but not typically passport-based. It's server-based. Iris is attractive because it doesn't give false positives in twins or relatives. In fact, you can set a threshold in iris recognition to give you very, very low false positive rates, much more than face recognition. So that's an advantage. As far as we know from the studies that have been done, irises don't age as quickly as faces do. So if you want a long-term identity management system, then maybe iris would be of more utility. I talked about this circumvention possibility. Stealing iris is difficult, and then I have to spoof. If I want to be May, I have to put something in my eye. This is a higher effort attack, and so there is some expense to launching an attack against an iris system. You can also get 2 eyes simultaneously. Most cameras today will collect 2 eyes simultaneously, which gives you more biometric power. The cameras tend to be more expensive because of this near-infrared illuminant. And as we can see, there's multiple applications. We've heard extensively about the India system, which more than a decade ago was collecting iris from hundreds of millions of people and using it to deduplicate. You wanted to make sure that you didn't give an Aadhaar number to 2 different people, to one person trying to claim an identity twice. And the low false positive rates enable that. Of course, it was done with fingerprints as well. On the left side, a famous system was used in the Middle East since the 2000s for checking whether somebody who has been deported from the UAE was coming back to the UAE. And so iris is used in border control extensively still in the Middle East. And also in Singapore. So Singapore has deployed a fully multimodal system now, face, finger, and iris, single finger, 2 irises, in some quite efficient e-gates, and they don't have a prior iris sample, so they can't do matching today, but they will be able to do matching when you come back. Interesting system, but iris is there, yeah. We have a leaderboard, we run benchmarks, open benchmarks. Many of the iris developers worldwide will come to us, they will send us an algorithm, we will run it. These kinds of leaderboards exist for attack detection, for morph detection, for face recognition, for twins, and for iris recognition. And you will recognize some of the names because they're in the trade show here this week. And we publish everything that we do with the link on the right. One attractive proposition recently, in recent years, has been the development and use of cameras that collect face and iris for free, almost simultaneous capture of face and iris. So you've got a multimodal biometric signature, 2 irises, 1 face, and you can use that in 2 ways, broadly. You can say, I will let somebody into my building or cross my border if either the face matches or the iris matches. You can use it in a different way. You can say, I want the face to match and I want the irises to match. That gives you a very different accuracy proposition, very low false positives if you require both to match. And you would have, if you were an attacker, you would have to spoof both modalities. This is quite attractive because the sensors are in one package. Again, it's more expensive than just face alone. But you would also expect resistance against twins. You would expect resistance against demographic effects, these false positive effects that I mentioned. So we are hopeful to stand up a benchmark on this sometime soon on vendor-defined fusion of two modalities. Okay, so now we jump into a question and answer session. I don't know if we're running on time. I think we're okay.
Working? Yes, okay. So let's start out with, since we have voting, let's start out with the most popular question. What technology solutions and strategies can be employed to overcome challenges in biometric enrollment for refugee children under the age of 5?
Right, so as many of you know, and it was discussed this week, doing biometrics on children is quite difficult. The aging problem, iris recognition, iris, as best we know, is stable from 6 months on, so there's a potential as a strong biometric to be used in children. However, children don't sit still, right? So you can try to do iris recognition on children, but they have a capture problem. Fingerprints, of course, have got very fine ridge structure that is present in young children, but we don't have adequate resolution from the current generation of sensors to pick up all the minutia points. There is, I suggested, we discussed this yesterday, that maybe a standardization effort should be put into defining a new generation of fingerprint sensors specifically to support recognition of children. The UNHCR refugee application, of course, is an important one. But you know, there are other people that think doing biometrics in children is something that we shouldn't do. Different policy considerations here. I think we didn't say earlier that our organization is not a policy-making organization. We're not a regulator either. But yeah, there's work to be done in under 5. There's no immediate panacea to this. Face recognition is your best bet, but aging happens quickly, so you would need to be aware that recognition will fail within a few years.
Okay, and a question for May. How are facial recognition systems handling face masks?
Can you hear me? Yeah, so this is a great question. So when the pandemic had hit us, NIST had actually launched a face recognition with face mask benchmark to evaluate how well algorithms can handle doing such a task when half of your face is occluded. And when we first set out to do this, many of the algorithms failed to do recognition on masked faces. But very, very shortly afterwards, they evolved the algorithms and improved it to a point where now a number of the top performing algorithms can handle face recognition with half of the face occluded by face masks.
All right, another one back to you, Patrick. What is the role of training testing data for developing well-performing facial recognition algorithms, and what do you think about the use of synthetic data?
Right. So there's a considerable interest because AI has recently moved along and is very capable of producing synthetic images. That if we look at these images, we see human faces. The research has progressed so you can generate multiple images of one person in different poses, different expressions, different lighting considerations. And so the people who build face recognition algorithms are quite interested in that technology because in principle it would allow them to diversify their training material. Now, anytime AI does something, you are concerned with whether it's valid and reliable and represents reality. And so for face recognition, you care about two things.
whatever.
Does a synthetic face generator produce the right diversity? Does it capture twins? Does it capture different demographic properties? Does it capture the global span of face shape? And it will not do that if it itself was trained on limited data. You wouldn't expect a face synthesizer to be able to produce Aboriginal faces, native faces in Australia, if it had never seen those before. This would just be left out. So, yeah.
So one more question for May, and then we'll continue on. Does female makeup affect face recognition, also wigs, and how does this affect liveness detection?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do see changes in similarity scores when females apply cosmetics. We also tested the presence of cosmetics in our pad test. One thing I'll say is the use of facial cosmetics, it's really hard to use cosmetics to impersonate someone, unless, again, you're really, really, really good. So the fact that I was actually able to evade my iPhone using my wig and mustache and makeup was actually quite impressive. What we saw is, recognition typically changes with facial cosmetics, and it can have an impact, but the level of impact really depends on how much makeup you have on and whether your intention is to essentially attack a system.
Okay, so in the interest of keeping us on time, I think we'll move on to the age estimation and validation. And we can come back to questions at the end.
Okay, so next I'm going to talk about age estimation and verification. Age assurance has been the subject of recent legislation worldwide, and within the United States, at least 7 states have passed age verification laws that requires platforms that might contain harmful information to minors, such as adult platforms, for them to use reasonable age verification methods to verify the user's age before letting them access the material. So there's a need for age assurance to support a wide range of applications. And while the mechanism may not be specified in legislation on how we do age verification, software-based face analysis is one attractive approach because it can operate statelessly without the need to store photos or store any biometric information. So given the recent topic of age assurance in legislation, NIST decided to relaunch our age estimation benchmark. We dusted off our benchmark from about a decade ago. We ran an age estimation benchmark in 2014, largely before the AI revolution. So our new test, the 2024 test, includes multiple functions relevant to age estimation and verification, and I'll be going over some of these results today. So just a little bit about our data sets. We used a diverse data set totaling around 11.5 million photos. And the photos from the databases differed in image quality and reflected a variety of age, sex, and regions of birth, which allowed us to analyze things such as image quality and demographic effects and other items. All right, so here are some results for the 6 developers that participated in our test thus far. We ran these algorithms on the same exact data set of visa photos that we used in 2014. And what we have highlighted in red are the top performing algorithms from 2014. And what we see is that 5 algorithms in 2024 now beat the 2014 algorithms on this mean absolute error metric, MAE, which is essentially the absolute difference between the estimated age and the actual age of the person. So I'll note that mean absolute error is a generic statistic that's well understood, but there are other relevant application-related metrics that we look at as well. So one example of an application-related metric is what we call challenge T, or in this case, challenge 25. And in challenge 25, we're talking about if someone is estimated as looking below 25, they need to prove their age using a different method, such as a photo ID. So let's say if the legal age to purchase alcohol is, say, 18, we would be concerned with how many people who are below 18 who are incorrectly classified as being above 25, which would give us a false positive rate. Another application metric has to do with kids' online safety. So for example, getting into a teen chat room may be limited to people between a certain age range. And if the legal age range is, say, between 13 to 16, in our example here, we would measure how often people who are outside of that range, both below and above, would incorrectly be estimated as falling within that age range. And we could generate a false positive quantity with that as well. All right, so some other results here. We found that image quality mattered. We ran the algorithms on a pristine set of well-controlled portrait photos, and then ran the same algorithms on a set of less constrained border photos, which have distinctly lower quality. And the rows here are showing 17-year-old males that are classified as over the age of 25 by region of birth. And we see that image quality matters. We see that false positive rates in the lower quality border photos is higher. Here we have results for one algorithm, but this trend pretty much exists across many of the algorithms that we tested. Okay, so we also looked at demographics. We broke down challenge 25 false positive rates by region of birth and sex. And here we're showing challenge 25 on males born in Eastern Europe. And you see here that false positive rates in some cases are quite low, and in some cases are approaching 0. So that's good news. But if we look at males born in East Africa or East Asia, the numbers tend to get a bit higher, false positive rates. And then we look at women, and the numbers generally go even higher. For 5 out of the 6 algorithms that we tested, women give you higher false positive rates than men. Okay, just one closing note on age estimation. So operationally, if the outcome of an age verification check yields some sort of benefit, you'll really need to incorporate presentation attack detection within your age verification process, because it would be very easy to put up a photo of someone else who's perhaps older and bypass the age estimation system. Okay, Craig?
Talk about fingerprint, and particularly contactless fingerprint work that NIST is doing. So we, in 2014, started what we call a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, a CRADA program, where we partner with developers of the technology, where they can send their technology to us, we can do testing on it, and we can have collaborative discussions with them on how to develop testing, results back to them without making them public so that they can make improvements on the technology. And this has been going on for about a decade now. One of the first things we noticed was some fundamental differences. And when I'm talking about fundamental differences, I mean between contact capture and contactless capture. Because at the time, and quite frankly still, contact is the kind of gold standard that law enforcement in the US uses for capturing fingerprints. So some of the differences we noticed right away was a change in resolution or difficulty in capturing 500 PPI images. And this was particularly with mobile devices, because holding the device up to take a picture of the hand, the distance to the hand would be very inconsistent. Another area is with the interaction with legacy algorithms. So up till then, all the algorithms have been trained on contact captured data. So they're not used to seeing contactless. So one of the things we looked at was the number of features that would be detected by an algorithm when fed contactless data. And as you can see from the plot, there were significantly less features noticed in the contactless data. And this can have impacts on algorithm performance when trying to do matching. The graphs are all nice, but let's throw out a few pictures to kind of show you some of the things I'm talking about. So on the left, you can see a contact capture and an equivalent contactless. And one of the cases we see is too much detail. So in a contactless capture, it's a photo of the image that then gets rendered into a 2D image to mimic the contactless capture. And in that rendering process, we've noticed that some of the processes can actually create ridge structure or artifacts that aren't there in the original image. And right next to that is a case where the rendering can actually white out particular areas of the image. So where there is ridge structure, you're not actually seeing it in the contactless captured image. And then there were some artifacts created on the edges of the image in the contactless cases, where we're not seeing the ridge structure, but we're seeing some odd artifacts created on the edge of the image. And then what we call contrast inversion. So depending on the lighting that's on the fingerprint when you capture it, the photo, you can actually get areas where the dark ridges become light valleys and the light valleys become dark ridges. And then for larger hands, the capture and the area, it might be hard to get that into that area when you're holding the camera up without getting it really far away from the hand. And then, of course, you can have background issues. Where are you capturing the photo and what is in the background can impact the capture and segmentation of that image. And I talked about before about some of the issues and the fundamental differences, and we've done matching, and this radio plot just kind of highlights where the dark triangles are on the top right are matching that was done contact to contact, and you can see that's generally near perfect matching. This is done with a law enforcement quality matcher, so it's a high-end matcher that we were using. And then as you get down to the not highlighted triangles going around the plot, you'll notice that error rates start to increase as you introduce this is contactless to contact-based capture that we're doing the comparison to. The main thing I want to highlight here is that we are seeing increased error rates when those are introduced in those systems. And it varies by device to device, contactless device to device, so it's not consistent. So one of the things we were tasked with is to develop guidance on certification of contactless devices. In the world of contact, there's what's known as Appendix F, which is a well-defined certification process that the law enforcement uses in the US to certify contact-based capture. But the test targets and stuff that were used in that really don't work in the contactless world. So we were working on developing new test targets at NIST and to use for contactless. And we're up to a stage where the one on the bottom right now, you can't see it in this image, but there's actually a laser-etched fingerprint on that test target. And it's a 3D printed bone in the center. We are also up to the point now that we're adding colors to those test targets so we can do various levels of different color fingerprints and pigments in fingerprints.
This is what we call culture.
And we're also hopeful that once these targets are finished, that they will be able to be used with contact-based approaches as well. So we think they're going to play a very important role in the future in continuing to certify devices, both contactless and contact. Along with that, we developed a tool called the NIST Fingerprint Registration and Comparison Tool, or NFRACT. And the tool is designed to put two images up side by side. In our case, we are typically doing a contact-based capture and a contactless capture, registering the images based on minutia points in the images, and then running a series of tests and metrics to measure the quality of that contactless image compared to the contact capture. And what's come out of this is we have two publications, NIST Special Publication 336 and 339. And what 336 is it goes into measurements that we developed into more detail into the measurements that are used to measure the quality of the contactless capture. And then 339 is a specification for certification. So it's guidance on that organizations can use to do certification of contactless devices in their operations. And we are currently working with 22 partners on that and doing testing of what's been developed. What I want to highlight here, two things. One is that 339 is not a certification itself. It's a document that organizations can use. So NIST doesn't do certification of devices. So if you hear someone say that my contactless device is NIST certified, that's not true. We don't do that. So I just want to get that out there. The other is that our initial guidance, the interest in the US has been about, you've heard me talk about contactless compared to contact. So this initial guidance is about certifying devices for capturing contactless prints to search against an existing contact database. We have plans to do more work for potentially, could you certify a contactless device for enrollment? But at this point, some of the differences we're seeing in those, most organizations in the US still want to use contact-based for their enrollment database because it's going to give them the best quality. The other area we're focusing on with contactless is interoperability or data interchange. So we have, I mentioned earlier, the ANSI NIST standard, and we are working on updates to that standard to help support the latest in contactless capture technology. We published a special publication. So I think the final area, and we are doing great on time, is human interaction in biometrics that we want to highlight. It's on usability. And we have a group, I should point out, we have a group at NIST within our division that specializes in this, and they shared these slides with me to present today. So usability, we want to focus on what we really need to understand is the users. The context that the environment that they're using the device in, the tasks they're being asked to do, and what are usability metrics, because they're not all the same as the performance metrics that we've been talking about for algorithms.
So most probably.
And why is it important to champion the human? Well, past history has told us that if we don't champion the human and consider the human interaction, you're going to face potentially long lines at the point of capture, confusion amongst the travelers, and maybe overall distrust in the system, or just aggravation with trying to use the system and causing more delays. So what are some of the things you want to do in usability? You want to make observations about how the user's interacting with the device. You want to listen to the user. They're going to tell you difficulties that they're having and that you may want to address. You want to measure properties of affordance. How intuitive is it for the user to use a device? How obvious is it? You want to observe the interaction of the user with the device and things they're doing. And there's some emphasis that the users are not wrong. You listen to them. They're telling you what they're having difficulty with. Pay close attention to your users. And then performance measures, as we've talked about before, for algorithms are not the whole story in usability. So some of the things you do, you sit in an airport and you watch. And please disregard my typo here, but you perform sufficient testing. And you observe the users in action. So spend time watching what they do, what they don't do, difficulties they're having. And here's an example of when you're observing, and something we've seen with devices, is taller subjects have difficulty with lower counters, and vice versa. Shorter subjects have difficulty with tall counters. May, as an example, was very thankful for the stand, the podium today, that it was much shorter and she was able to be seen behind it. So it's a great example of usability of in this case, a podium and not a biometric device, but fits right into the talk. And then the other is designing instructions and feedback. You want where you can, standardized symbols to guide users, standardized instructions and templates to guide them on the use of the device. So the other part is paying attention to your human and their mental models, in their past experience. They may have mental models on how to use a device. They may already have attitudes about using the technology, especially when you get new technology. Their past mental models, their past attitudes may influence their use of new technology, and again, their behaviors. As an example here, when NIST first started doing some usability testing on contactless devices, they put a device out with minimal instruction for the user. And based off their mental models of how to use fingerprint devices, they went up and put their hand on the glass of the contactless device, not knowing they were just supposed to hold it over top of the device and not touch it. So just an example there. So the biometric performance is impacted by user characteristics such as age, gender, height, experience and trust in the system, ability. Sometimes physical ability can come into play, and then overall perception of the device, the technology, the whole system. And in biometric system factors include ergonomics, again, affordance, the instructions, are instructions making the process more clear or causing confusion and muddying the waters? And then accessibility, making sure that the devices and the setups can account for all, the entire population and not marginalize certain aspects of the population that can't use normal setups. And it's important, so that just wrapping up, it's important to champion the human because the human factors can impact your capture time, it can impact your capture quality, and in turn, these can impact system performance, your total throughput, your matching accuracy, and your total cost of your system. So I think we can wrap up with a bit of Q&A. We still have about 8 minutes. What I'm going to do here as well, as I mentioned the QR code, so I'm going to go to the last slide and then leave the QR code up while we do a Q&A so that everyone can scan the code and you should have access to the PDF of the presentation we did today. And then we'll come back to a short wrap up in about 5 minutes. So we can either do questions for me or remaining questions.
So yeah, there's a question for you, Craig. Has NIST done any tests on multispectral imaging fingerprint readers in terms of their performance and accuracy? Oh.
Sorry, I was having some trouble hearing with the echo, but has NIST done any testing on multispectral? And the short answer is no, we have not.
Yeah. Multispectral fingerprint sensors were developed a decade ago or more to try and address the presentation attack, gummy fingers, and we haven't really been in the sensor testing business. So yeah, we don't have a lot to say on that one.
So just going from the top, are there any open source face recognition algorithms that perform well?
Yeah, so our benchmarks are open worldwide to anybody who would like to send us an algorithm. And indeed, in 2017, we got an algorithm from Imperial College in London called ArcFace, which was quite competitive at that time. The graduate students and professor that made that algorithm later formed a consortium of mostly Chinese universities, and they developed an algorithm called InsightFace. And it's available in Python, it's open source, it is not, as far as I know, well supported, and its performance will have been eclipsed now by more recent algorithms from commercial developers. It exhibited the same kind of demographic false positive variations that the other algorithms did. Yeah, we haven't tested it now for maybe 2 years, but it is available and you see it mentioned in academic papers.
I'll just add that the last time we tested InsightFace was sometime in 2023, and those results actually exist on our leaderboard today. And what we're seeing is it's very competitive on passport ID style portrait photos, lagging behind in the unconstrained border crossing photos at the moment, but it potentially could be because they haven't sent us an updated algorithm. Okay, so the next question is, what technological solutions and strategies can be employed to overcome the challenges in biometric enrollment for refugees' children under the age of 5? Already?
Yeah, we did
Okay.
that. I have one. Is it safe for biometric customers to gauge biometric systems' effectiveness only through NIST evaluation? If not, what else can be considered?
The short answer to that one is no. We evaluate components, typically. We don't evaluate full systems. So we have photographs sitting in databases that they come from real systems that are operated by typically the US government. And to the extent that our photos represent what those images would look like in those systems, then our benchmarks do predict those kinds of applications. However, just because we evaluate an algorithm and you take that algorithm into this room and try to do recognition of everybody sitting in this room, you would expect entirely different performance. It all depends on imaging systems, environment, lighting, whether you've got cooperative subjects. So prediction of system performance, full system performance, is not something that we do. Academic literature and some internal tests that we've run, that face and iris will work very well. Face and finger, likewise, will work very well. When I say work, I'm talking about accuracy, but if you want to collect finger and iris and face, say in a border crossing, you could expect to take some extra time. Now, maybe that's not what you want. Capture time, capture failure are all quantities that you would want to measure. And so there is an overhead to collecting multimodal data generally.
Okay, I think we don't have any more time for Q&A. Patrick, if you want to wrap up.
So if we can go back to the slide deck, there were maybe 2 slides at the end. So yeah, thank you all for listening to us. And coming to this, it's 2 hours of slightly concentrated information. That QR code on the slide, on this last slide, is the presentation that we just gave you. And so it's probably megabytes or tens of megabytes if you download that. So persevere, and if you can't get to it automatically, email us, please. We're happy to send the slides out. What we talked about today, a lot about face recognition. Face recognition is an emerging modality in many ways that has accuracy now is comparable with face and with finger and iris, except in twins, except it has some demographic problems. The AI revolution is ongoing. Different modalities have got different prospects for spoofing and evasion, and different use cases. Border control, we've all got passports, we've all got faces on passports. Identity documents are being issued with faces almost universally, not necessarily so much with iris or fingerprints. We talked about usability and human factors. Systems are built with sensing an analog object and digitizing it, and then you enter the digital domain in terms of matching and quality assessment and attack detection. We talked about attack detection. May mentioned injection attacks. This is a cybersecurity problem, that if I'm authenticating to my phone, how do you know that I don't have a virtual camera on my phone? This turns out to be a problem with some commercial solutions to try and address that problem. There are no independent tests of injection algorithms today, but there are independent tests of presentation attack detection systems today. We would hope in coming years to run presentation attack tests on fingerprint and iris as well. We've only done it for face at this time. If any of you have got databases that you are have legal permission to share with NIST, we would like to talk with you about whether we could use them, because we've got outstanding sort of technical questions that we would like to address. So happy to talk at any point on this. With that, I should leave the floor to Dr. Attic.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, NIST. Thank you so much. I guess there's an official photo. Thank you so much. Obviously, this has been a very intense, actually, the photographer would like a photo with the NIST team. You've done a tour de force. You went through all aspects of biometrics, which is at the heart of most identity programs, modern identity programs, so we thank you for that. We thank you also for the offer to make available the deck online. So anybody who wants it, please download it. And we hope to contribute as a community to your research efforts by sensitizing you to some of the issues that are particular to this continent. So let's stay in touch and let us continue to improve biometric performance so that we improve the trust in identity systems. So thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. He wants closer. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, the moment that you have been waiting for has come. And I see the room is filled up with a lot of people in the back waiting